The morning light crept through the dusty blinds, brushing the countertop where I stood, buttering toast for my mother. It was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that hums in your ears, not peace, just the absence of anything better. I'd always believed that family should feel like home, but mine, it's more like unpaid labor. I laid out her pillbox and a glass of water. The toaster clicked. She hollered from the back room, "Did you remember to get the milk?" No thank you. Never a please, just expectations wrapped in habit, the kind of love that forgets to knock. Our house was one of those aging ranch-style homes in the older part of suburban Houston. Every creak in the floor had a story, none of them pleasant. The wallpaper peeled where the steam from the kitchen settled, and the appliances were so old they probably owed someone back rent. It all reflected what we'd become, worn out and stuck in place. I glanced at my phone as it buzzed on the counter, a bank alert. I tapped it open, expecting something minor, maybe another grocery charge, but it wasn't that. 138.42 at Nordstrom. Again, I didn't even have to guess. It was my sister. She'd used the joint card. Again, without asking. Again. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, and felt something low and sharp move through me. Not quite rage. More like disappointment seasoned with exhaustion. Funny how generosity turns into obligation when it's family. That card was meant to help Mom, pay for meds, groceries, the gas to get her to church, but it had slowly become my sister's personal ATM. Designer shoes, spa packages, you name it. And every time I mentioned it, Mom just waved it off. She's your sister. Don't make a fuss. But it wasn't just a fuss anymore. It was theft, dressed in a family sweater. I heard Dad's voice echo in my mind. Not loud, just steady. Don't let love make you a doormat. He used to say that when I'd come home bruised from school fights, when I let friends walk over me. Back then it felt like advice. Now, it felt like a warning. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open. I waited until the house had gone still, until I could hear only the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Then, I logged into the bank app. Click. Settings. Password change. Done. I leaned back and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. A small line of sweat traced my spine. It wasn't bravery. Not really. Just enough. In my notebook, I wrote one line. She can't use my card anymore. Then I paused. Stared at it. Was I betraying them? Or finally standing up for myself? A part of me whispered guilt. Another part whispered freedom. I listened to neither. Just sat there, letting the silence judge me. The last time she used the card, I had to borrow money from a friend to cover rent. And she had posted pictures of her new handbag like it was a prize she'd earned. I shut the notebook. Next morning, Mom called from Walgreens. She was furious. Loud enough I had to pull the phone away from my ear. The card was declined. At the pharmacy. Do you know how embarrassing that was? I didn't say sorry. I said, "It's not about you. It's about boundaries." She paused. Then came the line I'd been dreading, the one that made me feel like a traitor and a child all at once. In this family, respect means silence. I hung up without another word. When she came home, she threw her keys on the counter so hard they bounced off and hit the floor. "Why would you embarrass me like that?" she snapped, eyes narrowed, cheeks flushed with indignation. I didn't flinch. I pulled the card from my pocket, placed it on the table between us, and walked away. Behind me, she whispered, just loud enough, "You're abandoning me, just like your father did." That stopped me. But I didn't turn around. Later that evening, I sat in the living room, lights dimmed, a half cup of cold coffee in my hands. I remembered being 8, sitting on that same couch, scraped up from a playground fight. Mom had bandaged my knee, kissed my temple, said no one would hurt me while she was around. Now, she defended the one person who kept bleeding me dry. She used to defend me, now she defends my sister's entitlement. I said it out loud. Quiet, but it echoed in my chest. Family doesn't just borrow money. They borrow guilt too, piece by piece, until you're paying interest on silence. I looked at the card again, now resting on the coffee table like a landmine. A family isn't broken all at once. It leaks, drip by drip, until the flood comes. A knock at the door startled me. I stood, walked to the hallway and opened it. There she was, My sister, smiling, shopping bags dangling from her wrists like nothing had happened. She stood there like it was just another Thursday, that same smug tilt to her chin, bags in both hands, smiling like I had just opened the door to a birthday party she threw in my honor. But I knew better. Lydia's smile wasn't about celebration. It was cover. "Hey, little brother," she said, stepping inside before I could say a word. I moved aside without greeting her. She walked straight to the kitchen, dumped the shopping bags on the table like it was still hers. Mom sat in the recliner, arms crossed, lips tight, watching, saying nothing. "I got Mom her favorite perfume," Lydia announced with a fake warmth. "You're welcome." The words sank like a stone in a pond. Surface ripples, nothing deeper. She knew exactly what she was doing. I watched her move through the kitchen, casual as ever, like the card wasn't locked, like the last 24 hours hadn't meant anything. How do you confront someone who lives in denial? I didn't answer. Just stood there, letting the air between us grow heavier. She unpacked another item, cologne for herself probably, and glanced at me like I should clap. Dinner was already awkward before we even sat down. Mom had reheated meatloaf, and the smell clung to the air like regret. We sat around the table, Lydia to my right, Mom across from me. 3 plates, 3 glasses, and 1,000 unspoken words between them. Lydia took the lead, of course. "Work's been a mess," she sighed, slicing into her meatloaf. "But I managed to run a few errands for Mom. Had to use your card last week, by the way. She needed her meds." She didn't look at me when she said it. She didn't need to. Mom nodded slightly, as if that justified everything. I gripped my fork tighter. The words "I had to" rang like a bell in my head. A warning. A lie dressed as loyalty. It's not just the money, I thought. It's how she rewrites every lie as love. Lydia smiled at me, teeth showing this time. "Don't change your password again, Zeph. It's rude." That did it. Her voice was playful, but the intent wasn't. I forced a breath, looked at my plate, then at her, then back down. My food tasted like nothing. I excused myself quietly, standing without explanation. The sound of my chair dragging across the tile cut through the silence louder than yelling ever could. Upstairs, I shut the door behind me, leaned against it. My chest was tight, not from anger, at least not just that, from years, from patterns. In my drawer, I found the old notebook, the one I used to track expenses, page after page, bills I covered, promises never kept. I flipped to one page in particular, my birthday 2 years ago. Lydia had said she'd cover dinner, walked out early. I got stuck with a $180 tab. In families like mine, debt isn't about money, it's about silence. That line echoed in my head as I closed the notebook. No more. I walked downstairs, every step louder than the last. Back into the dining room. They were still sitting, still eating, still pretending. I pulled out my chair but didn't sit. "You're not entitled to the card," I said, voice low but steady. "You never were." Lydia's fork paused mid-air. She blinked once, then laughed. "So now you think you're above family?" Her voice had teeth, sharp, practiced. Mom finally spoke. "Both of you, enough. We've been through worse." I turned to her, not shouting, just finally speaking. "That's the problem. We go through it, but we never fix it." Lydia pushed her plate away, eyes narrowed. "You're being dramatic." "No, I'm being honest. You treat my kindness like it's your right. You spend like you're helping when all you do is drain." She stood, too fast. One of her bags fell off the table, spilled its contents. A bottle of wine rolled toward the edge. She didn't pick it up, just glared. "You want to feel like a martyr? Fine. Enjoy it." Then she left. Slammed the door on the way out. Silence returned, but this time it wasn't empty. It was heavy. Final. In my house, truth always walked out first. I went back to my room. Heart still pounding, fingers still curled tight. I opened my banking app. Another attempt to access the card. Denied. She'd tried again. I set up new alerts, changed every access point. This time, bulletproof. I didn't feel guilty, Not this time. I didn't raise my voice. I raised my standards. I walked past Mom's room before bed. Her door was open. She was awake, eyes on the ceiling, not looking at me. No words, just that look. But for once, it didn't land. I felt clean, like cutting a toxic root, even if the tree shook a little. As I turned back down the hall, something caught my eye by the door. A bag, one of Lydia's. She must have left it behind in her dramatic exit. I bent down, opened it slowly, and what I found inside made everything worse. I stood in the hallway staring at the bag Lydia left behind. Beige leather, designer tag, one of those look-at-me purses she swore she got on sale but never really did. My first instinct was to toss it in her old room, let her deal with it next time she came clawing back. But something about it, the way it sagged slightly, how it felt heavier than it looked. I crouched down, unzipped it. Receipts, lots of them. Electronics from department stores, some high-end cosmetics, then an envelope tucked between two boxes of unopened skincare. The name on the front was unmistakable. To Mom. Neat handwriting, a little faded. Postmarked 3 years ago. I sat on the floor, fingers hovering. Part of me said to put it back. Respect privacy. But another voice, quieter and sharper, whispered what I already knew. Some truths don't wait politely. They break in. I opened it. The paper inside was thick, like someone wanted it to feel important. It was from Aunt May, Mom's sister. Someone I hadn't heard from in years. Someone who once promised to help me with tuition when I got into community college. The letter said she'd sent money, not just once, monthly for nearly a year, to help Mom, to help me, to keep the family afloat. She ended the letter with a line that stung more than any insult. I hope this gives you some breathing room. You deserve it. But I never saw a dime. I stared at the signature. My mind jumped back to the months I texted Aunt May, called, even emailed. No replies. I thought she'd moved on, or maybe died. Turns out Lydia just intercepted the mail and never told anyone. Not Mom, not me. At least that's what I wanted to believe. I sat there in the quiet, feeling like a dam cracked in my chest. This wasn't just about money. It was the theft of something bigger. Opportunity, dignity, trust. I thought about all the times Lydia said she was handling it, waving off my questions with a smile. I used to think she was just bad with money, but now it looked more like she was good at control. Quiet colonization of the one thing I had left, my effort. I walked into my room still holding the letter, pacing. The ceiling fan clicked with each turn. I considered waking Mom, showing her. But I paused. She's been tired lately. Not just from age, but something deeper. Worn down, hollow. And then it hit me. What if she knew? What if Mom saw that envelope 3 years ago and said nothing? That thought, it sat heavier than the betrayal itself. It meant this wasn't just about Lydia. It meant silence was the family trait I never asked for. I opened the bag again. Beneath the makeup and receipts was Lydia's old phone. It powered on with one click, no password. I should have stopped there, but I didn't. Text threads loaded slowly, and with each scroll, another piece of the puzzle slid into place. Conversations with banks, credit card companies, even people she hadn't spoken to in years. One chat thread froze me. She was texting a friend from high school. He's too soft. Always will be. That's why it's easy. She meant me. My thumb hovered over the screen. Then I started taking photos of the texts, the receipts, the letter, not to post, not yet, just to have proof. For me. When people show you who they are, believe them the first time. I used to think that was just a quote. Now it felt like a warning I ignored for too long. I closed the phone, set it aside, and sat on the edge of my bed. You grow up thinking your family's broken in the usual way. Divorce, maybe. Some yelling. Money issues. But this was a quiet rot. You didn't notice it until it stained the floor beneath you. I looked at the envelope again. Was there a point in telling Mom? She'd just excuse it, wouldn't she? Lydia meant well. We needed help. Maybe she didn't open the letter. Or maybe she did and just didn't want to lose the illusion of unity. Either way, it didn't matter now. What mattered was this. I don't need her to take my side. I just need to stop taking the fall. My phone buzzed once, an email from the bank. I didn't bother opening it. Instead, I turned off the lights, ready to end the night. As I walked toward the door to lock up, I noticed something, a knock. Not gentle, not curious. It was sharp, repetitive. I froze, and when I opened it, I realized this wasn't over. It was only beginning. I sat alone in my study, door cracked, phone glowing in my hand. The screenshots, the bank messages, Lydia's texts mocking me. They were all there, truth lined up like witnesses in a courtroom. That room used to be where I studied late into the night, back when I believed hard work could clean up chaos. Now it was where I sorted through betrayal. I used to think we were a messy family just trying our best. But sitting there, watching Mom's shadow pause in the hallway before she kept walking, no knock, no word, I felt it in my chest. This house used to smell like grace. Now it smells of secrets. And I knew. I was about to trade silence for a truth that might cost everything. I took a deep breath, then started prepping for what had to be said. I organized the evidence, printed the receipts, lined up the letter from Aunt May next to Lydia's texts, cross-checked dates. I wasn't going in empty-handed. My memory pulled back to those old nights at the kitchen table, Mom praising Magnus for being the responsible one while he disappeared for days. I stayed up helping with bills, juggling shifts, never asked for thanks, just assumed someone noticed. So I called Finn. "Hey, I need to ask you something straight." He came over, didn't even take off his jacket. I showed him the texts, the records. "Did she ever lie to you about what I paid for?" He nodded before I finished. "She kept a second account, said you didn't want the stress of dealing with it. But she never told you?" That was the moment the last thread of benefit of the doubt snapped. I looked at Finn. "Tell me, did she ever change your memory too?" He blinked. "Man, I thought I forgot on my own." By the time Mom stepped into the room, I was ready. She looked tired, older than yesterday, but she held her chin high. I didn't shout, just pushed the folder toward her. "Do you think love comes from guilt or choice?" She flinched. "What's this?" "Evidence, not assumptions. You can read it, or I can explain it." She sat, barely touching the chair. "You're twisting things." "No," I said. "I'm just collecting what you already said, what you already did." Magnus came in right on cue, dramatic as ever. "Of course you'd pull some martyr stunt. You always assume you're wronged." I turned to him, calm. "I'm not the one who forgot who paid off your second DUI fine." He scoffed, but I didn't stop. "Mom, if you built this house on my labor, you owe me acknowledgement." That hit her. She stiffened. Then she snapped. "You want to accuse me? Where were you when I worked nights, skipped dinners, pawned my rings to keep us fed?" She pulled a paper from her purse, neatly folded. "This is your handwriting, a statement saying all your money was a gift, not a loan." I froze. I didn't remember writing it, but it looked real. For a moment the world tilted. Maybe I misremembered. Maybe I had given too much. I felt the old sickness of doubt crawl up my spine, but then, no. I caught my breath, stepped back. Whether you call them gifts or responsibilities doesn't change what you allowed to happen. I pulled out the original letter from Aunt May. It had postmarks, signatures, dates. It contradicted every excuse Mom gave. She stared at it, said nothing. Magnus looked away. Finn stood still, not breathing. The room, once full of shouting and excuses, went silent. It wasn't anger I felt. It was clarity. All this time I kept asking them to see me. Turns out I needed to see myself. They weren't going to change, but I could stop playing the role they wrote for me. Mom stood up slowly, walked to the shelf, pulled down a dusty old box marked Dad's Papers. And what she pulled out next made me gasp, because it wasn't supposed to exist. My eyes locked on the folded paper Lenora pulled from the old box. It was sealed with yellowing tape, edges curled like it had been stashed away for years. She laid it on the table like it was a royal decree. "Your father drew this up before he passed. He entrusted the house and all assets to me." Her voice didn't shake. Mine did, internally. I hadn't heard a word about a contract during probate, not a whisper. It's amazing, I thought, what people keep hidden until they think they're about to lose. I reached for it. She hesitated, then tossed it like it was garbage, not gospel. The signature looked off. Notary stamp smeared like someone had wiped it too hard. A pit opened in my stomach. I took a photo and texted it to Cam, a friend from college. He was clerking at a law firm now. I just typed, "Is this even real?" While I waited, I grabbed old cards Dad wrote me. The loops in his Ys, the slant in his Ts. They didn't match what was on that page. I remembered his voice, a month before he passed. "Whatever happens, the house should be yours and Zeph's. Make sure it stays in the right hands." Now, this. My phone buzzed. Cam responded fast. "This isn't legal. No record of filing. Notarization's invalid. It wouldn't hold in court." My chest didn't tighten. It opened. "People who feel entitled," Cam added, "often create their own paperwork." I stood up, walked to the living room. Mom and Magnus were there, talking in low voices. I didn't wait. Held the document up along with my phone. "This doesn't hold in court," I said. Clear, flat, unapologetic. Lenora's jaw tensed. I did what I had to do to protect this family. Magnus stepped forward like a bodyguard. "You're tearing everything apart over a piece of paper." I looked him dead in the eye. "No. You tore it apart by pretending love came with conditions." For the first time, I felt something new. I wasn't pleading. I wasn't asking. I was done kneeling for peace in a house built on quiet war. Then Lenora's mask slipped. "Your father wasn't the saint you remember." She said it like she'd been waiting years to say it. "He had another account. Part of it went to someone else. A woman. Her name—" She stopped, like she knew the word would land heavy. I didn't know the name. But the silence that followed told me this wasn't just about money, it was about stories we were told, versions of people we built our lives around. "So that's why you hated that I was close to him," I said. She didn't deny it. Magnus didn't speak. That silence was louder than shouting. Everything shifted. I saw it clearly now. This wasn't about a will or a deed. It was about control. Grief twisted into something sharp. I set the document down, calmly. "I'll get the real will. I'll get legal advice. And you won't stop me." She blinked. And for the first time that night, maybe ever, she looked unsure. I didn't need her fear. I just needed her bluff exposed. "You can be honest with me," I said, "or be exposed. That's your choice." The room shifted. Magnus turned and walked out. No slam, no words, just walked away. Lenora sat back, eyes wide, lips pressed, no response. I stepped away, phone in hand. Then it rang, a number I hadn't seen in years. And when I answered, the voice on the other end said, "I know what your father really left behind." The house was dead quiet, that kind of silence that only shows up after midnight, when everyone else is sleeping or pretending to. I sat at my desk with the lamp on low, surrounded by old papers, legal printouts, voice memos, the copy of Dad's fake contract Lenora threw on the table. I should have been drained, but instead I felt alert, like truth itself was keeping me upright. Then my phone buzzed. No name, just a number I didn't recognize. "Look in the drawer behind your father's old safe." That's all it said. I froze. I knew exactly the drawer. Hadn't touched it in years. Not since he died. Not since the day we packed away his suits like folding memories. I got up, walked down the hall to the back room. The safe was still there, half covered by a blanket and a box of tangled cords no one had sorted through since 2017. The drawer creaked when I pulled it open. Inside, tucked between two old tax folders, was a leather folio, aged, stiff, with a brass button and his initials etched on the flap. There was a label on it, for Zeph. I held my breath and opened it. Inside were typed draft wills, handwritten receipts, letters in Dad's script, stuff I'd never seen before, all of it pointing back to me, not Magnus, not Lenora, to me. One page had his handwriting clear across the bottom. Zeph deserves what he earned, no one else. I took photos of everything. My hands weren't shaking from nerves. They shook from that terrible mix of relief and rage, like finally learning the storm had a center, but it was always aimed at you. I sent the documents to Cam again, with a note. "This is what I found. Need your eyes on it." While I waited, memories came back. One from college, Dad standing by the truck as I left for the fall semester. He'd said, Don't ever let anyone talk you out of what you've built. Not even me. I hadn't understood it then. I did now. Cam's reply buzzed through in less than 10 minutes. These are the real thing, he wrote. Dated, signed, 2 witnesses. This folder changes everything. I stared at the screen. I should have felt triumphant. But the first thing that hit was grief. So many years wasted. So many nights second-guessing myself. Then footsteps. Lenora stood in the doorway. No knock, just standing there like she'd been watching. Burning old rooms now, Zeph? I didn't flinch, just slid one of the documents across the table. She stepped forward, saw the letterhead. I caught the way her lips twitched, barely moving. Then she turned and left without a word. But not for long. Within half an hour, she had Magnus, Aunt Shay, and even the neighbor Mark, who happened to be a local notary, standing in the living room. All of them whispering in corners like it was a courtroom drama. She came in, full voice now. You're tearing this home apart, wanting what you weren't given. Magnus joined in, arms crossed like a guard dog. These are just old papers. Dad said a lot of things. I stayed still. Then she dropped the hammer. That will is forged. Mark here will attest. It doesn't match the one filed. You're faking your way into something you don't deserve. That landed hard. I felt heat crawl up my neck. Not from shame, from fury. But I didn't shout. These aren't just papers, I said. They're the promises he made. With dates. With witnesses. With records you couldn't erase. I laid out my phone, played an audio file. Dad's voice from an old voicemail I kept. Zeph, don't let them twist things. Keep the copy in the drawer. You'll know when. Even Aunt Shay looked stunned. Then I dropped bank statements, transfers Dad made to a private account for my name only. The room fell still. Octavia stared. Magnus shuffled his feet. Lenora's jaw clenched so tight I thought she'd crack a molar. I stood taller. Not loud, just steady. You've been trying to make me doubt myself for years, I said. Not anymore. She didn't speak. Not because she had no words, but because the ones she wanted to use wouldn't work anymore. Later that night, after they all scattered, some to the porch, some to their cars, I sat alone, and I let myself feel it. Justice doesn't come cheap. You lose comfort. You lose quiet. You might lose family. But there's a point where silence becomes surrender. I had passed that point. Was this what Dad wanted? For us to be at war? No. But he also didn't want me erased. So I kept going. Not for revenge. For clarity. For my name. At dawn, the knock came. I opened the front door, still barefoot, still holding my coffee mug. Mail. 1 envelope. Heavy. Official. Courthouse return address. I tore it open and read the first line. Inside, the judge had written something no one in my family expected. I woke to a pounding knock like someone trying to break the silence around me. The mail slot rattled and an envelope slid through. Courthouse return address. My heart thumped, hands trembling as I grabbed it. I recognized the handwriting. Judge's order to verify the heir's contract. The paper felt heavier than any accusation. I stood in the dim hallway, pausing. Mom's silhouette flickered through the crack in her bedroom door. Asleep or indifferent, I couldn't tell. In that moment, justice felt close and terrifying. By the time I reached the study, adrenaline was buzzing. I spread the folder's contents across the desk. Draft wills, bank transfers, documents notarized, letters I had only half believed existed. I pulled out Dad's old checks, faded ink and shaky lines. The signatures matched. Every crooked line, every loop. Octavia sat beside me, her phone muted, ready in case the attorney needed to be called. She didn't say much, but her quiet presence meant something real. I remembered Dad's voice when he said, "You are as responsible as Magnus." Back then it sounded like burden. Now it sounded like truth. My throat tightened. The room felt tight, walls closing in. I held my breath. Then I gathered everyone downstairs. Mom, Magnus, Cressida. They looked at me as I stepped into the living room, folders in hand, proofs visible. I could see Lenora's face go pale. Cressida's eyes widened. Magnus shifted, uneasy. I read aloud the judge's order, then the matching signatures, the notarized letters. I told them what I'd seen in Dad's writing, how he insisted on fairness, how he meant me to have what was mine. Immediately, Lenora's voice broke through. "You forged this," she said, voice trembling but loud. I met her gaze, calm. If I forged them, why would Dad address me by name, not you, not Magnus? Silence. Mom's eyes flickered guilt. Magnus looked away. Cressida fumbled with her phone. Lenora's defense cracked. She claimed she'd kept things for me so I wouldn't be burdened. Said she protected me from attorneys, from shame. Used love as her shield. I saw tears in her eyes, real ones, but even they couldn't mask the resolve behind them. When Magnus tried to mediate, I interrupted. "No more talking," I said. "Your choices have consequences." Something inside me broke and rebuilt in that moment. Sadness and triumph mingled in my chest. I was no longer waiting for permission to speak truth. I pushed forward. With Octavia's help, I filed the documents publicly, posted a notice in the local newspaper, press release. I wanted everyone to know those papers weren't just mine. They were Dad's promises they tried to bury. Lenora tried to stop it. Rage in her voice, talk of scandal, shame, but the truth moves faster than fear. Her control slipped. Standing there, I declared, "If truth is shameful, let shame belong to those who hid it." A weight lifted I didn't know I had been carrying. Then, late that night, after the world outside had gone quiet, I heard my phone buzz. Magnus had whispered something to Lenora as she stormed off. Fear and anger flickered in her eyes when she looked at me. Then the lawyer called. He said something no one saw coming. The call came just after sunrise. I hadn't even poured coffee yet. The attorney's voice was calm, but every word landed heavy. The judge's order had been filed publicly. Every heir received a sealed copy. It was no longer family business. It was public record now. I stood at the kitchen counter, the blinds casting sharp lines across the floor. The sun didn't feel warm. It felt like a spotlight. Somewhere down the hall, Lenora and Magnus were still asleep or pretending to be. Either way, they had no idea what had just hit them. I stared at the phone. Thought, their power was built on silence. Now the silence is broken. I wasn't sure if I felt victorious or terrified. Later that morning, I stepped outside to grab the paper, and there it was. Front page, my name, the contract, the judge's words in print. Neighbors waved slower than usual. Some smiled too wide. Others avoided eye contact altogether. I got messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. "Proud of you." Knew something was off. She had it coming. Some texts just said, "What did she say?" At church, I heard from a deacon. Lenora skipped the committee meeting for the first time in 10 years. The rumor mill was running full steam. Whispers at the grocery store. Side glances from parents at the school drop-off. Octavia reached across the breakfast table and took my hand. "You did what was right, even when they told you it was wrong." Relief didn't come in a flood. It came like a draft through a cracked window. Cool, quiet, uncertain. By that afternoon, Lenora had summoned a family meeting. It was like a press conference. Extended relatives on video call, even distant cousins who'd stayed out of things. She wanted an audience. She stood like she was in court, dressed sharp, voice polished. "You think this judge cares what you do behind closed doors?" she said with venom barely concealed. "Do you think dragging this through public mud honors your father's memory?" She tried to paint herself as the victim of gossip, said I had fed the wolves with family shame. She talked about legacy, about how I'd betrayed it. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, honor isn't about how it looks. It's about doing what's right, even if no one claps for it. Some family members nodded. Others looked away. The room was split, not just across lines of loyalty, but across generations. The older ones wanted the silence back. The younger ones, they were listening. And that was enough for me. After the call ended, I picked up the phone and called the bank. Told them to revoke Lenora's access. Legally, she no longer had standing over any part of the estate. Magnus called within minutes. I let it go to voicemail. Then came Lenora's message. "You're destroying what's left of this family." No, I thought. You did that when you lied. I drafted a letter, sent it to every relative. It was short, clear, No anger, just facts, no accusations, just the truth with links to legal records if they wanted to see for themselves. One by one, messages rolled in. Some thanking me, some silent, some angry. But none of that mattered anymore. Something in me had settled. The local radio asked me for a comment, not because I was famous, but because people related to it. Not about money, about the feeling of being erased, voiceless. I gave them my story, not polished, just real. That night I walked through the house. Every room had echoes, some full of pain, some with laughter I hadn't heard in years. But they didn't weigh me down anymore. They reminded me I had survived all of it. And now, I was the one writing the story. I remembered something I once read. Justice delayed is not justice denied, but justice delayed leaves scars. It's true. I know I'll lose some people who'll never forgive me for pulling the curtain back. But I'm done pretending. I'll live out loud, whether they hear me or not. As I was heading to bed, I checked the mailbox one last time. Mixed in with ads and bills was a thick envelope, no return address. Inside, a hospital document. Confidential. Dad's name in bold letters at the top. What I read next would shake everything I thought I knew. The house was quiet again. Not the kind of quiet that creeps in after an argument, but the kind that settles after the storm has passed. Furniture no longer felt like barriers. Walls didn't echo old battles. For the first time, this place, this house I once resented, felt still, almost sacred. The candle on the windowsill flickered against the glass, casting my reflection back at me. Not the man I used to be, bent, bitter, buried, but someone lighter. I sat at the dining table with a blank sheet of paper and started writing. Not to Lenora, not to the judge, not even to Octavia. I wrote to myself. A letter that started with no date and no title, just ink and breath and space. I survived, I wrote, but now I want more than survival. I paused, watching the flame dance. Then quietly, I wrote, it took losing them to find me. That envelope had been sitting on the hallway table for days. I'd moved it twice without opening it, tucked it under a bill, set it aside like it meant nothing. But tonight was different. I slit the top and pulled out the pages. Hospital forms, yellowed, fragile. My father's name, date of my birth. The words blurred at first. Then they hit. Psychiatric observation, emergency admittance, delusions, temporary disassociation, medicated hold. The night I was born, he wasn't there because he couldn't be, and no one ever told me. I leaned back in my chair, the document slipping from my fingers onto the table. No tears came, just silence, just knowing. So all those years I wondered if I'd done something wrong, if I reminded him of something shameful. The truth was, he was broken before I ever got here. And Lenora, she had known. She'd weaponized his pain, used it to justify every twisted story, every time she rewrote my worth. I wasn't less than because of who I was. I was controlled because she needed a story that made sense for her. I sat there a long time, not angry, not even shocked, just settled. The next morning I drove to the cemetery. The grave looked the same, but I didn't. I crouched by the stone, brushing away a leaf. You didn't fail me, I said softly. They failed us. From the bag I'd brought, I pulled a small rosemary bush, dug a shallow hole, planted it, packed the soil with my bare hands. An old man walking by gave me a quiet nod. I nodded back. There was a day, long ago, when Dad and I walked the county fair. He'd bought me a lemon snow cone and said, "This one's too sour. You take it." We laughed the whole way back to the car. It was the last time I remember feeling safe with him. Now, I let it go. Blaming ghosts changes nothing. But forgiving them, that's something else entirely. Back home, I sat down again. Fresh sheet of paper. This one I addressed to someone who would never read it, but might exist one day. To the daughter I'll never have, I began. I wrote about truth, about battles, about how silence isn't always safety, and how standing up doesn't make you cruel, it makes you brave. If you ever find this, I wrote, don't be afraid to ask the questions no one wants answered. That letter would replace every will, every contract, It wasn't about who gets what. It was about who I finally became. When I finished, I folded the pages gently and placed them in a wooden box. Not hidden, not buried, just waiting. I stepped out onto the porch. The sun was setting, casting pink and gold streaks across the sky. I sat down with a cup of tea. No phone, no noise. Octavia pulled up not long after. Didn't say much, just sat beside me, her hand brushing mine. No drama, just quiet warmth. The house would be on the market next month. I knew that. But tonight, it was still mine, still full of memory and meaning. I looked out at the sky. Darling, I changed the password, I whispered. But I changed much more than that. The wind carried it away. Then, a knock at the door. It was late. Too late for deliveries. Too late for visitors. I stood up slowly. Sometimes closure doesn't come in letters or legal files. Sometimes it walks back in when you least expect it.